Back on post-draft presented by Geico. What a luxury when one pick nets two talents. The Jacksonville Jaguars now tasked with striking the right balance for the two-way star in Travis Hunter. The Wonderkin GM, James Gladstone, taken to the phones on his first draft day in their big chair and swapping spots with Cleveland at a steep price, but ultimately landing Hunter in Duval. Back in studio with the guys to split this thing down the middle. We're going to go AFC first, get into the NFC, talking some winners and losers here. And hear me out. I love a playmaker. I know game starts inside out, but we're going to start outside in and talk playmakers here in the AFC. Your biggest AFC winner playmaker is who?
Ashton Genty. He's incredible. We've talked about him just the last segment in terms of what he's capable of doing. And you might say, and I heard someone on this set say it, named Joe Musso, well, he didn't play in a Power 4 program. He ran all over Oregon like he owned Oregon.
I believe I said he broke tackles in the Mountain West. I just want to be quoted properly.
Fair enough. I've been known to embellish. This case was no different.
He's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. We're looking to pull at the small strings that all of these prospects offer, and that was the one to pull.
And exactly. And as our buddy Rick Spielman used to say, you hate the kids until you draft them, and then you love them.
Then you love them.
So there's every reason to love Ashton Genty. Special at Boise State. He's going to be special at the next level with Brock Bowers and, of course, Geno Smith, the new quarterback.
Rand, give me a playmaker here on the AFC side.
For me, I'll go with the late pick in pick 22 and go with Marion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. And you just see that fit. That feels like a Jim Harbaugh fit. A guy that's going to get downhill. He's going to attack those creases. And can we talk about how big and massive and strong that new Chargers offensive line is going to be? And you have the threat of Justin Herbert pulling the ball away on RPOs. And think about it, he's going to step into a J.K. Dobbins role, as J.K. Dobbins ran for 905 yards last year in 13 games. So you're going to get that same similar style runner, and I think he'll be just as productive.
It was Altz, the premium pick last year. This year, it's Hampton, thinking about the big hog mollies up front, the running game. It's so in the image of Coach Harbaugh and what he's trying to do. Year one, he takes them back to the playoffs. Year two, we'll see what sort of step forward they can take with those guys leading the way. Let's talk about offensive line here on the AFC side, because this was an offensive line class that, you know, presented opportunity early, mid-round, late. We turn our attention to you, your biggest winner.
Armand Membu Wilson.
Yes.
As Rand likes to call him my son, because I've been on the Armand Membu bandwagon for quite a while and been fighting off all the haters. And look, he goes to the Jets, and not necessarily a surprising pick. I was leaning maybe towards Tyler Warner at this point, but I think he makes a ton of sense because you get your right tackle. He's 6'3" at the combine. He grew to 6'4" at his pro day, so that's great news. He has 34-inch arms, so if you care about arm length, that's perfect. And he is only 20 years old. He is only going to get better. So I love the idea of him at right tackle, next to Elijah Vera-Tucker, their former first-round pick. Yeah. Next to Ola Pashinu, the left tackle position, last year's first-round pick. Joe Tippmann, their second-round pick at center. They are building an offensive line. They are helping out Justin Fields for now. We'll see what that looks like. He's on a 2-year deal, and we'll go from there.
You just send him Rand and I's best at Thanksgiving. That's all that we're asking, is that when the family gets back together, that you say hello for us.
Keep the receipts.
Your favorite offensive line selection, AFC side.
Before we go there, we thought Ryan was in the picture when they showed him getting drafted. We were waiting for Ryan to pop out.
He was waiting for the hug in the background.
Left me hanging.
But for me, I went Will Campbell. Okay. You know, tackle out of LSU to New England. It's just the right fit. We're talking about a solid, consistent player, and everyone wants to talk about the arm length or lack thereof, however you want to scale it. This young man is going to step in. He'll be a day one starter, and he'll be New England starter at left tackle for the next 10 years, hopefully. Yeah. But he has to, in my mind, having Mike Vrabel there, remind Vrabel of his former teammate in Matt Light. Similar build, similar arm length, has to remind him of that, and that's what probably made him comfortable with the pick.
Man, to put somebody in that sort of echelon, or to ask that of him, that's exactly what they need out of this pick. You're hoping that you're getting Drake Mays, the godfather to his future children. That's the type of thing you're trying to do here. Is, like you said, a decade worth of production, and it could start here on this day for Campbell. Getting to the defensive side of the ball, I'm still taken aback a bit by the fact that we got so many interior defensive linemen selected. We saw a couple edges, yes, a couple off-ball linebackers as well, but your favorite defensive line selection going to an AFC team, Rand?
Got to go with my guy Malachi Starks, and I'm riding this train. Malachi Starks, to me, is what Membu is to Ryan. I love this guy, and I think he is an absolute perfect fit into the Baltimore defense. This just screams a Baltimore defense, a defensive pick and style of player. And you put him in a secondary with Kyle Hamilton. And now you can do some creative things. You can play a rock and roll safety. And what I mean by that is now you just have two safeties. And wherever the strength of the offense is, you just roll one down versus the other. And you don't have to make one just a strong, one is the free. And both of these guys have the ability to play nickel. Right, so Kyle Hamilton can be your big nickel in run situations, and then Malachi can be your nickel in some of your other sub versus 11 personnel teams. So I love the fit here, and I think he's going to step in another guy to be a day one starter.
So much of Baltimore's success defensively last year came when Hamilton found that niche once again, found that way to play the game like he only does. Now you have two willing tacklers back there in your final level of defense. I know that I presented it as up front, defensive line, but any defensive player, AFC, as we had here, that you're in love with the pick.
I'm going to say in the secondary as well. I'm going to go with Jahdae Barron out of Texas. Plays in the slot, can play outside, can play free safety, can play closer to the line of scrimmage. Ran the 4.39 at the combine, and he played that fast. He reminded me a lot of Brian Branch, coming out of Detroit a few years ago, but Brian ran in the 4.5s, and that's why he fell to the second round. So he's going to Denver. Now you have Patrick Surtain, you have Riley Moss, you have Jaquan McMillan playing in the slot, and there's going to be an opportunity for certainly Jahdae to get on the field in that secondary. I thought that maybe running back might be a landing spot here for the Denver Broncos. It's wild to say that this team, after drafting Bo Nix last year and getting Sean Payton and all the things George Payton has done as GM, this team has very few needs. So this isn't a luxury pick, but this is a guy that's going to have an opportunity to play right away, even though it wasn't necessarily the top of the needs board when you looked at Denver heading into this draft.
Wide receiver duos, so 2024. We're talking secondary duos in 2025 with some premium picks going to places that already have talents in those types of rooms. We're going to bring this to summation on the AFC side, a winner and a loser. Looking at an AFC team that's walking away from this thing feeling like they hit the nail on the head, Ryan.
Yeah, the Tennessee Titans. Yeah. They didn't mess that up. They took Cam Ward. He's the best quarterback in this draft, and by what ended up being 20-something picks, and I think most people would agree that was the range in which he was probably better than the next quarterback. And I think, and you know Cam well, this young man, in addition to all the physical tools, has an edge. And there's something to be said for the neck-up approach to playing the quarterback position in the NFL, because all the guys can make the throws. All the guys are 4'6", 4'7" guys. It's the matter of getting punched in the mouth and being able to get back up and make plays. And Cam has proven that at every level, and every year he has gotten better as a quarterback.
Your biggest winner?
For me, I got to go with the Cleveland Browns. I mean, to make that trade and you still get the 5th overall pick, right, and you get a player that you probably coveted and had pretty high on your board, but then you walk away with still 4 picks in the top 100 left. And that has to be a win. That has to be a win. Now you're sitting there in the second round, you have pick 33 and pick 36. That's an absolute win to me for Andrew Berry. Now, you still have to pick the right players, but you have the right picks to really fill out your roster.
How quickly can you exact change is only fueled by the draft picks that you have. You now have more, and you can change a little faster there in Cleveland. For every winner, there is, in fact, a loser. And our loser is staring us in the face because he was staring them in the face. And I know you both share the same loser because I got the answers to the test here. Why the Pittsburgh Steelers, Ryan?
Well, they have a huge need at quarterback. Shedeur felt like a natural fit. I had heard that the organization liked Shedeur enough to take him at the bottom of the first round. And even if you pass on Shedeur, I understand Kenneth Grant, the tackle out of Michigan, being in need and taking him, should he have been available, he was long gone. I had heard that Derek Harmon, the player they took, had some injury concerns for some other teams. So I have a lot of questions about how they got to this point. Again, I understand defensive tackle, just the player I do wonder about long-term health-wise, and also the looming question of who's going to play quarterback in 2025.
Maybe the most important question that we ask year by year of each of these teams in football. You had an answer. It's right there for you. What do you think may have been the impetus or the driving force in them not selecting Shedeur Sanders? They only know, but how do you read that move?
To me, it says that they have something, probably nod, nod, wink, wink, set up with Aaron Rodgers whenever he's ready. And they truly feel like that's going to happen. For me, I understand why you would take a defensive tackle to eventually replace Cam Hayward, because he's not going to play forever, and a young guy that he could pass the torch to. I totally understand that. But if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, the model of consistency and stability, you take a guy who's injured, who has an injury history, and depending on who you talk to, you don't know if this guy's going to make it to his second contract with the club, which does not feel like a Pittsburgh Steeler thing to me. And then you add in, you pass on the quarterback, whether it was Shador, whether it was Jackson Dart, Tyler Shuck, whomever. And now you're going to still be faced with this question in the 2026 draft as to who the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback is going to be for the future.
And the other thing, the point that Rand made earlier, is that unlike the Browns, because this was my question, they don't have the draft capital going into next year to move up because they always end up picking picks 22, 30. So even if they were the Browns and had the extra first-round pick, that would allow them the opportunity to move up. But if they're picking in the middle to the bottom of the first round, they're not going to be able to target whoever the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks may be.
To quote our colleague, the 2-time Super Bowl champion, black and yellow, Bryant McFadden, what are we doing? That was the question posed. The answer, it still lingers. Gentlemen, great work as always. We got more coming here on CBS Sports HQ with night 1 of the draft behind us. Straight ahead, we turn our attention to the NFC teams having selected, but who made out the biggest winner? Find out next. Back in studio, Ryan Wilson, Rand Carthon, Joe Musso. The Hallis Trophy has a safe home there in Philadelphia, but got plenty of teams trying to knock them off that mantle at the top of the NFC. Going to take a look at our biggest winners and losers here in the NFC, starting with an offensive playmaker. Ryan, your favorite offensive playmaker heading to an NFC team?
My wide receiver 1, excuse me. Someone's on this desk is wide receiver 5, incredibly disrespectful, but Tedrow McMillan, as we look for the culprit here, headed to the Carolina Panthers to give Bryce Young some help, and they do need help at wide receiver. We talked perhaps Jalen Walker being an obvious choice here, the linebacker / edge rusher out of Georgia, the 8th overall pick, but they took Tet because, well, they have Adam Thielen and they have Xavier Legette and they have Jalen Coker, who was a fun story last year as an undrafted free agent. Tet McMillan gives them an immediate jump ball, high point, contested catch machine down the field. Does he regularly separate? No, but that's not his game. And Bryce Young is one of the best anticipation throwers among the young quarterbacks. Yeah. Played really well down the stretch, and I think they are turning the corner with Dave Canales, and I love the fit there. They need help on defense, sure, but I think they couldn't pass up Tet McMillan there at number 8.
You got Legette going 6'3". You got Tet now going 6'4", butting his head on 6'5". There's some big targets there for Bryce Young to distribute that ball to. You're going wide receiver as well, but elsewhere.
Going wide receiver, going Matthew Golden to Green Bay. This just screams Matt LaFleur to me, right? And I think when Golden's name was called and they showed the draft room, I saw a little extra smile on LaFleur's face. This guy's the quintessential X wide receiver in that offensive system. And if you know that offensive system, they love to have the guy that's going to stretch the field vertically, where they can take shots for explosive, but also create some of that intermediate game that they like to throw and play in between those numbers. That was the role that that Christian Watson was supposed to fill, but he's suffered through injuries, and this is a plug-and-play X-receiver in that offense that's going to create those explosives for him.
And you think of some of the burners that have come out of this program, and it almost felt like a sigh of relief 30 years in the making for Packers fans who finally select a wide receiver in the 1st overall pick, albeit in front of that crowd there in Ashwaubenon. So there was some praise for this young man who, you made a great point, doesn't get to jump on the PJ anywhere. He's just staying right there in Green Bay. Robbed him of a private jet.
So unfortunate. He's literally going to walk 1 block from the stadium.
Facilities that way.
Facility, and probably to the Hilton Garden Inn that's up the street where he's going to stay.
Well, we're going to keep our eyes here on a couple Longhorns, because when we go to the offensive line, that's once again where your eyes go there. Number 9, Kelvin Banks.
I've always loved Kelvin Banks, and I love the way he plays his game, and he's a guy that I've consistently said he is the model of consistency. And going there, this is a New Orleans pick. They draft a year ahead of a need consistently, and Ryan Rapchek retired this week. They also announced this week that they're not picking up the 5th-year option of Trevor Penning. And this feels to me kind of like when they took Andres Pete 13th overall in 2015, where you have this lineman that there's no rush to put him out there on the field, but he could probably play guard for you this year as one of your best 5, which is what they did with Andres Pete. Now, guard ended up being the home for Andres Pete, but there were moments where he played some left and right tackle for him. But I do think that Kelvin Banks will eventually be their starting tackle.
He is a top 10 pick forever, going there at number 9 to the New Orleans Saints. Your favorite offensive line?
3 picks later, pick 12, the Dallas Cowboys. Do they need running back help? Sure. They instead decide to bolster the offensive line with Tyler Booker out of Alabama, one of my favorite offensive linemen in this draft class. I thought he had a chance to be a top 15 pick, even though he's a guard only, quotation marks. And for all the knocks we like to take against the Dallas Cowboys, they have made the offensive line a focus. They took Tyler Guyton in the first round. They took Tyler Smith in the first round several years ago. They have Cooper Beebe playing center now, who they drafted last year. And now you have Tyler Booker. So you're giving the offensive line and that offense with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb all the help they need up front. They signed Javonte Williams at running back. They can still circle back, get a running back in day 2 or day 3 if they want to. Incredibly deep running back class. But I think this is the perfect landing spot for Tyler Booker. And right around the range I thought he would come off. I know he didn't run the fast 40 time at the combine. I do not care, because I don't think they have plans to give him the ball, throw him the ball. Just they're going to ask him to block, and that's what he does extremely well.
I don't know if you guys noticed on the graphic, their last 3 first-round pick offensive linemen have all been named Tyler.
There's something there. We found something, the through line to it all, and it is big shoes to fill there on that offensive line with the retirement of Zach Martin. So they're going to be looking to plug some of those holes up front. A measured approach here by Jerry and the Dallas Cowboys going offensive line there. Let's go to defense. Any level, your favorite player? Obviously, we're going to be looking early in this draft.
Abdul Carter, 3rd overall to the New York Giants. It just feels like a layup. If not for Travis Hunter being in this draft class, Abdul Carter would have been the #1 player on my big board. He ended up being number 2. And he is just learning the position, Rand. He was playing off-ball linebacker until last year, wore the number 11, so reminded a lot of people of Micah Parsons. He's not quite there yet. He's still incredibly raw, but he doesn't have to be the guy in New York because they have Brian Burns, they have Kayvon Thibodeau, they have Dexter Lawrence. I think it's a best-case scenario for a young defensive edge rusher learning that position, coming into that system. I think he's going to eat early and often.
And for me, you got to go with the Atlanta Falcons and what they were able to do with getting Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. Now, was the compensation too much for the future? Yeah, probably. I don't know that I would have given up a future.
We'll see what that first is next year. That's going to determine whether or not this deal was done properly.
Correct. But if you're a Raheem Morris defense, you now have your edge guys coming off the edge that are going to give you that pressure and create those sacks that Atlanta's been missing. And this year they went out in free agency and you signed Leonard Floyd, and then you have Arnold Ebiketie, who is going into the final year of his rookie deal, and now you add 2 dynamic guys that can come off the edge. And then with Jalen Walker, you can kind of play him in multiple spots and move him around and create mismatches for him, lining him up over guards, or even playing him off the ball at off-the-ball linebacker. So love what the Falcons did there, getting these 2 dynamic young playmakers.
Yeah, doing 2 for 1 there, making up for lost time as they've continually gone offensive premium player position in the first round, whether it be Penix or London or Bijan or Pitts. This is a commitment back to the trenches there for Atlanta. Talking winners and losers, a holistic approach here in the NFC. Your biggest winner?
Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Okay.
So Emeka Egbuka, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about him as a potential first-round pick in the millions of mock drafts we did in the last 2 weeks.
Loved him.
You loved him, and you were right. Former wide receiver. Joe knows wide receivers. Ted McMillan aside. But in terms of Emeka Egbuka, in terms of the Ohio State lineage of wide receivers, Emeka Egbuka does not get the credit he deserves, I feel like. It's easy to talk about the Marvin Harrison Jr.'s and the Garrett Wilsons, the Chris Olaves, the Jackson Smith and Jigbas. Emeka Egbuka is in that conversation, and he is the most professional receiver, not only in this draft class, but perhaps in the last few draft classes, because he can play slot, play outside, fantastic route runner, and I think Baker Mayfield's going to love him.
And it's to the point of you saying the multiple positions that he can play. This is a Chris Godwin replacement. And Chris Godwin, he fractured or dislocated his ankle in week 7, I believe. And so they can now afford to bring him along slow because you have a player that can play that type of role in that offense. And if you talk to some people in Tampa, they will tell you that Chris Godwin is probably the most valuable receiver that they have because he can do a multitude of things, and he's a presence for them in the run game and sticking his face in there, blocking linebackers, being able to insert.
So maybe a future heir to that throne there. Mike Evans, each day a day older, but still giving you 1K plus. But that is quite a 3-headed monster at full health, a wide receiving core for Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay. A big winner in the eyes of both of our experts. A big loser, you guys are on the same page here, but it does come a conditional loss, let's say. Your biggest loser, Rand.
Yeah, you put the Saints because we've heard that the Saints have been in love with Jackson Dart. So the thing is if you knew, if this is true, then you allowed the Giants to jump you when you had the ammunition to go from 40 to wherever, 25, 26, wherever to take him. And so you miss out on your quarterback. However, you can make a case for now you sit there at 40, you still have a Shedeur available to you at 40. What do you do? And if they can walk away from at 40 with a quarterback, most notably Shedeur, then we can flip that and call them a winner.
Yep. No, I completely agree. And the thing about Shedeur that'll be interesting, it felt like, to Rand's point, that the Saints were higher on Jackson Dart than Shedeur. But you love the idea of Shedeur having to play indoors, so you can't make the excuse about the arm strength outdoors in the AFC North, for example, in the wintertime in December. And also, Kellen Moore has a good track record with quarterbacks young and old, and you like that fit, given that they've now drafted Banks at tackle, and they have the playmakers, the wide receivers, starting with Chris Olave.
Ryan, Rand, fantastic stuff. We appreciate the insight, but there's always more work to be done, and you're only as good as your next rep. We take a look ahead at day 2 of the NFL draft with some big names still out there as Shedeur Sanders slides to day 2. Possible landing spots. We'll break it down next. Back on draft coverage here on HQ, where it's green like money. The Ravens shoring up edges with the Marshall product. Mike Green at pick 59. Big value and a big win in B-More. Back with the guys. Mike Renner joining the conversation as well. Fellas, we're looking at big winners on day 2, but also across days 1 and 2 of the NFL draft. And it's hard to look away from Baltimore right now, Mike.
It really is. Their first-round pick, Malachi Starks, feels like, you know, when Tyler Linderbaum fell to them at the back end of the first round. It's just like, this is a darn good player. Maybe it's not a value position, but he's not going to be a bust in the NFL. You watch his tape from his freshman year at Georgia to his sophomore to his junior, and it's like, he has all the things you want to be a modern, do-it-all safety in the NFL. He can cover man-on-man in the slot. He can range from deep and get over the top of balls. And he could just go in the box. Maybe he's not a guy who take on blocks, but he's a good tackler in the box. So not a lot this guy can't do. And then getting Mike Green, the big faller in this first round, in the second at pick 59, he was 10th overall on my board. The guy knows how to rush the passer. Those 2 picks back-to-back, just home runs.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the Ravens doing Ravens things. You were talking about that last segment, Rand. And I mentioned Odafe Oweh, his contract's up in 25. David Ajabo, his contract's up. So this is a natural progression of what comes next, and it feels like the evolution of the edge rush position and what Mike Green was able to do at Marshall. And the other pick they got in the 3rd round, they finally went offense, Emory Jones Jr., the right tackle out of LSU, who probably kicks inside to guard. They have Daniel Faalele playing the right side at guard, and it feels like he could be a potential starter, if not right away, but maybe a month or 2 into the season. And that's the guy you're going to have for 4, 5, 6 years if he plays like you can expect him to play. Not quite a right tackle in the NFL, but I think a guard guy who can move inside and be incredibly effective.
Rand, take me into the room, because luck is one thing, timing is another. How does preparation lead to those 2 things?
I mean, it's key, right? So as you're sitting there in the draft room and you're monitoring your board, you also have a board that's in view of team needs. And so you're understanding where other teams may go and the players that may fall to you. And so, touching on this, everyone up here knows how much I love Malachi Starks. So I'll leave that alone. I want to take him on as one of my sons. And then you add in Mike Green, who we talked about, and how I feel about him and his ability to rush. But then Emory Jones. And I know Ryan feels like he can kick inside, and I do believe that, but I'm not so sure that he can't play right tackle. And we're talking about a guy that was the tone setter at LSU. When you talk to the folks at LSU, everyone respected Will Campbell over there on the left side, but they knew Emory Jones was the one that you did not want to mess with. And so there were things that would go on, the little fights that you would have in practice, and usually Emory Jones was the guy that ended those things.
Yeah.
And does that not sound like a Baltimore Ravens?
Certainly does. Good boards there in Baltimore. We'll leave it at that as we move our conversation on to another winner. And Ryan, I know you liked what Atlanta's done over these first 2 days, because we were trying to figure out who stepped in it, in the mud in day 1, and that trade, giving up first-round compensation next year, it made some people scratch heads, but it's also a very clear direction that Atlanta's trying to strike here.
And they've tried for years to figure out the edge rush position, and you can certainly have a conversation about that first-round pick they had to give up in 2026 in order to come back into the first round to get James Pierce Jr. And if this works out like they hope it does, it's the same conversation it feels like we were having with the Houston Texans 2 years ago when they took C.J. Stroud and then traded up to number 3 for Will Anderson Jr. and gave up a ton. No one has since talked about it because it's worked out perfectly. And the other reason, and I know Mike had some concerns about that first-round pick, but now he's on board because they took your guy Xavier Watts in the 3rd round, and he could have gone 10, 20, even 30 picks higher. So now they got help in the secondary. They got 2 edge rushers that are going to be there and get after it from day 1. I think this is a great development, given Raheem Morris, him wanting to get after the quarterback.
All I would tell you, and I'll keep it brief, All you have to do is go look at the smile Raheem Morris had after they took Xavier Watts. Raheem is a fiery guy, but that look that he had on his face was pure excitement because, like we said, he went and got the 2 pass rush early, and then to get an Xavier Watts in the 3rd round. You talk about what they're trying to build down there in Atlanta, they're well on their way.
He had 13 picks, Xavier Watts did the past 2 years. And he started his career at Notre Dame as a wide receiver. The guy did not play defense in high school. So for him to be this instinctive, this early on to the position, and now he goes next to Jesse Bates. Are you kidding me? Who's going to want to throw over the middle of the field against that defense?
I like ball skills on the defensive side of the ball. Got to catch that pill when you have an opportunity to do so. He's certainly capable of doing that. We've in years past had a clear and obvious butt end of the joke. Oftentimes it's the draft strategy at the center of the star, but Dallas earning some accolades here from this desk. Mike, what have you liked about Dallas's first 2 days?
It's tone-setting draft. I mean, it started right off the top there. That Tyler Booker pick. I mean, he is going to be a difference maker for that offensive line. You go from Zach Martin, one Hall of Famer, and I'm not putting Hall of Fame on Tyler Booker, but I'm putting this tackle duo of Tyler Smith and Tyler Booker, within the next 3 years, they will be the best guard duo in the NFL. I fully believe that, and he is a guy that's going to bring it every single day. He is a heartbeat of an offensive line sort of player. And then followed up with Donovan Ezraku in the second, Boston College edge rusher, a guy who a lot of people would have been okay with. Like, you wouldn't have been crazy if they went with him at 12, and he falls all the way to you in the second round. One of the best pure pass rushers in this draft class. Maybe going to give up some issues in the running game, maybe a little bit lighter in the frame, but I think he can develop because he has these long arms that he uses at his disposal. So for Dallas Cowboys team that's had some ho-hum drafts of late, this one looks like a big turnaround from that.
Yeah, I don't know what my 2026 mock draft is going to look like, but the person the Cowboys are taking.
We will be asking you soon, just so you know. That's
well, I can tell you this:
tomorrow's homework.
The Cowboys' first-round pick will be named Tyler. That far we got
that we know.
Way. Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind, and Tyler made this point in comments after he was drafted, that his job he felt like was to make the person across from him want to quit football, and that's the approach he takes. And I love that mindset. And there were some conversations about what his best scheme fit is. I think that makes sense in Dallas. I don't care about the 5-3-5 that he ran. Mike talked about Donovan Ezraku. Is he going to be good enough against the run? I think he'll get better. I thought he got better over the course of the season. Then finally they got Supone Revel at the end of the 3rd round. ACL last September. He has first-round talent. So it's just a matter of him not playing a lot of football last year. This feels like a steal when you have Deron Bland, you have Teron Diggs coming off the injury.
Yeah.
So those 3 picks, I don't know if they could have gone much better.
For me, it's no surprise. And I'll say it this way. Dallas has traditionally drafted well here in recent years. And kudos to Will McClay and his staff and those guys being able to identify what these coaches want. But this has never been their issue. The issue hadn't been the draft. It's been re-signing these players and signing free agents. So they continue to nail the draft, and now we'll see 3 to 4 years if they're able to maintain these guys and keep these guys long term.
I don't want to rain on the parade. The other issue has been January football. They've made some suspect decisions. If Rand doesn't want to say it, I'm okay saying it.
There's other issues at hand, but again, checking the box here on draft day in days 1 and 2 at least. Work still to be done in day 3. We'll get there, but I want to talk about player-specific setup for success because there are teams that walk away feeling like winners. And there's some players that are going to places where they can succeed right away. Who's a player that comes to mind for you, Rand?
For me is Travion Henderson going to New England in a Josh McDaniels system. He's going to fill that Kevin Falk role. He's going to team up with Ramondre Stevens and give them a change of pace 3rd down back. We're talking about a guy that is explosive. He is a slasher, and he is a really good player out of the backfield catching the ball. And he was probably the best pass protecting back in this class. And that is something that isn't taught a lot in college football. Usually these young guys use 3rd down as their down off, the guys that have been primary ball carriers. But this guy takes pride in blocking, and you see it, and he's going to be an awesome fit in that New England offense.
You know who else takes pride in blocking? Jack Besh. 2nd-round pick.
There you go.
Las Vegas Raider. My guy Rand's laughing at me. We don't know how fast Jack Besh is because he didn't run a time. He doesn't play particularly fast. That's not his job. He plays in the slot. He's a big slot, big catch radius. He's a long strider. And there are no people, no disrespect to Trey Turner and Jacoby Myers. They are good wide receivers. They need someone else not named Brock Bowers to help out Eugene Silver-Smith III. And they also drafted Ashton Jeanty. This feels completely different than what we're typically seeing from Raiders drafts in recent years. So I love the idea of Jack Besh there. I loved him at the Senior Bowl. I loved his tape at TCU before that. I think he has an opportunity to make some noise.
I'm going to go with another Patriot. I'm going to go with Travion's teammate they got in the 3rd round, Kyle Williams, the Washington State wide receiver. I love this guy's tape. For my money, he's the best separator in the draft class, outside of obviously Travis Hunter, who went very highly. but his ability to just make guys miss at the line of scrimmage, to shake guys at the top of his routes, I don't see a guy on this Patriots roster right now that's a better wide receiver. I think at this point in his career, Stephon Diggs is not that guy. Kyle Williams, I think, can be a high-end route runner, and he gets to learn from one of the best.
I want to make a dollar bet with Mike. More production at the end of the year. My guy Jack Best, your guy Kyle Williams.
Wow.
I'll go Kyle Williams.
Okay, let's see.
Strike it into the record.
100 pennies on the line, Musso.
Target share will certainly be on your side there with the Patriots still looking for some answers on the outside. Not everybody's a winner walking away from days 1 and 2 of the NFL draft. Straight ahead, we examine the other side of the conversation, diving into teams that may have missed the mark over the first 3 rounds of the 2025 draft. More HQ coming next. There is a dam forming at the confluence of rivers. His name, Aaron Rodgers. Pittsburgh yet to address quarterback with uncertainty remaining in the form of the 41-year-old 4-time MVP. Back in studio with the guys, we see some Jets tape there, but we're thinking Pittsburgh Steelers, and we're thinking still no quarterback.
Yep.
We obviously draw a line there to Rodgers. We have them tabbed as one of our losers through 2 days. Why, Ryan?
They don't have a quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is still a free agent as we sit here. Mason Rudolph, no disrespect. Skylar Thompson, no disrespect. They took Derek Harmon in the first round of the defensive lineman. They made it clear after that pick that that's exactly what they needed to do in terms of bolstering that part of the defensive line room. Cam Hayward is in his mid-30s. You like Derek Harmon. I liked him, but I was concerned about some of the injuries that we heard some other teams talk about. Then in round 3, because they didn't have a second-round pick because of that DK Metcalf trade, they went with Caleb Johnson, the long, tall corner. He's not long. 6'2", 220, sort of zone scheme in Iowa, and that certainly translates to what Arthur Smith wants to do. But he ran a 4.57, and I felt like there were better options there, quarterback or otherwise. So I don't love this draft for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know if they're measurably better today than they were 48 hours ago, and they still do not have a quarterback.
Go ahead.
And I'm sorry, and I feel the same way. I feel like not addressing this quarterback position, and I'm thinking about the future. Right, we can go ahead and pencil in Aaron Rodgers as their quarterback because you have to give them credit. Pittsburgh knows what's going to happen at that quarterback position, which is why they haven't addressed it here. But again, we're looking at 2026 and your QB1 is not under contract and you don't know where you're going to fall in next year's draft to be able to address that position for the future. So you still have not secured your future at that position, which has been a long-term question since the retirement of Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, they are putting a lot of eggs in one basket case, but it wasn't the draft to get the quarterback, right? It just was not. Unfortunately, at 21, they weren't going to go up and get the guy. So I like what they did with Derek Harmon. He feels like a Steelers defensive lineman. I get the injury concerns, but they need a transition plan from Cam Hayward because he can't play forever. He looks like he can. Yeah. The guy was still electric last year, but he can't play forever. With the Caleb Johnson pick, though, I do question a little bit. I'm with you there, Ryan, because you're drafting a guy who's a scheme fit for Arthur Smith's offense. And yeah, that's who your OC is now. But given the track record of Steelers OCs, how long is that going to be your OC? Is he going to last the entire contract of, Caleb Johnson here? Yeah. So to get him at 83 here when there was a lot of backs in this class, you could have waited, and I thought there were still a lot of good players on the board that could help the Steelers team. I agree. That pick I was a little on.
Rand, let me ask you this. As a running back, when we say these guys are fits for zone or gap schemes, shouldn't you be able to transcend that, whether you're a third-round pick or a seventh-round pick? Does that really matter, or maybe it depends?
No, it should. Any naturally good runner could fit in most schemes, right? But, I won't say who, but there's a prominent back in our league that is playing in a system that's not comfortable for him. And he prefers another way. But to show you the brilliance of that offensive coordinator that's calling the play, he's adjusted and given him some runs that he's more comfortable in. But he still continues to be very productive in a way that you wouldn't even know who he was. And so the really good ones, they fit anywhere. But then you just have guys who are just limited in what they can do in certain schemes, and so they have to make them scheme specific.
On the quarterback note, it is a league of haves and have-nots. If you have one, you have a chance. If you do not, you do not. And we don't have an answer yet on Aaron Rodgers. I also find it interesting what the discourse inside that room is like right now. I don't know if everybody's rowing on that river in the same direction with the short and long-term intentions at the quarterback position. Let's keep it moving here. We're going to put the Bengals under the microscope. And Rand, this was a big meal for this front office this whole offseason. You got to ink your wide receivers. You get that done. You have an edge who wants a deal. You have another defensive lineman that retires. And now you take to the draft and maybe you missed the mark in addressing some of those needs.
Yeah, and so you start, and you understand that when you allocate all your resources in terms of money on offense, then you're going to have to go younger on the opposite side of the ball because you can't afford to pay everybody, which is where Trey Hendrickson is finding himself now.
Yep.
And so you go Shamar Stewart yesterday, who is physically gifted, but that does not equal production, right? So there's a question mark there. And then you go with Demetrius Knight, who is potentially your Mike linebacker moving forward, but you still have Jermaine Pratt in that role, who's probably expected to be a free agent after the season. So how is he going to get on the field? And then you follow it up with Dylan Fairchild in the third, who will have a chance to break into that lineup. So you're really drafting 3 guys right now who are probably in a competition to start and not guys that are walking into clear-cut roles.
Yeah, I do just think that this felt like we have these needs, we have to go fill them. We're going to kind of eschew the fact that there are other good players out there and just plug the top player on our board, because those weren't value picks.
Yeah.
You know, where they got guys, there were other people that I just objectively should have been higher on your board if you could go for any position in the NFL. And I look at this Bengals roster, and like outside of wide receiver and quarterback, they really did have every position open to them, in my opinion. There aren't a lot of positions that are set on this roster, but it just seemed like they locked in on edge, linebacker, and guard. And that's why you get a guy like Dylan Fairchild, who I think can be good, but I don't think he's the immediate upgrade for you. He's only started for a year and a half for Georgia. I don't think he's day one plug and play. So for all those reasons, like, I don't think next year on this roster, any of these guys are making an impact, unfortunately.
Yeah, Randy and I talked about this. I'll ask you this, Mike, because I'm curious what you think. It feels like Shamar Stewart is a version of what they were hoping for in Myles Murphy, who didn't work out. And if it didn't work out, and I get, look, if you don't want James Pierce Jr. or Mike Green because of the red flags, even though historically Cincinnati has had some leeway there, fair enough, but it feels like it's a big ask for Shamar not to be Myles Murphy.
Well, we talk about Shamar like he's this utter freak, and truly he is, but just go back and look at Myles Murphy's numbers. They are almost identical outside of the vertical that Shamar has him in, but like he ran in the 4.5s at about the same weight. Like Myles Murphy was a freak. But that's the kind of cautionary tale, is that you watch him try to track down Lamar Jackson last year, and it was like a chicken with his head cut off. It was just child's play for Lamar outside the pocket. That's why Baltimore won both those games last year. So, yeah, I do worry about that. You're drafting the same player. Now, could he develop into a guy? Sure. That's what the edge position is in the NFL. It's the most athletically driven and physically driven position on a football field, but we just haven't seen it from him.
How about those wideouts? Cincinnati going to score some points. We'll see if they show up for the first month of the season. That has also been a problem for Cincinnati. Going to set it back around the horn here for a big reach. A player that got their name called and you maybe had them graded around a day, a couple hours prior to when they would go.
Yeah, Illinois' Pat Bryant, incredibly productive in college. He ran a 4.61 and he didn't play particularly fast. I think he's a possession receiver. I thought he plays well in terms of settling inside zones, and maybe that's what Sean Payton thinks he will do for Bo Nix. But I felt like in the third round was a little high. They have Devon Vele, who they drafted last year in the 7th round. Great production there. They have Cortland Sutton and obviously Marvin Mims, Evan Ingram. They have a ton of weapons. I just felt like with some of the other more athletic, faster wide receivers on the roster and available in the draft, if they had wanted to go that direction, that made a little bit more sense for me. But I will give Sean Payton the benefit of the doubt. It was just a surprise for me in the moment.
Well, for me, and I'm glad we have this distance between Mike and I don't want him to reach across and get me, because I'm going to say his guy here, and that's quarterback Dylan Gabriel to the Browns in the bottom of 3. And, again, this is no knock to him, and they addressed the quarterback position. Fine. I have no issue with that. However, Dylan Gabriel is coming into Cleveland to be a backup. And so you're taking a backup in 3. Could you have gotten that in 4? Could you have gotten that in 5? And then been able to add other talented players to the roster that will fill a more immediate hole than drafting a backup quarterback.
I'll see if I can get through my guy after that. But I'm going to go with...
Do you think Dylan Gabriel has a chance to start next year?
I think he will start. I think he will start for them.
How soon?
Maybe not week 1, but at some point.
Okay.
We can bet. We can have a bet.
Another dollar bet?
Dollar bet?
I will go with T.J. Sanders, though, a South Carolina defensive tackle, pick 41 to the Buffalo Bills. And not only pick 41, they traded up to go get him pick 41. I just worry about this because he, when watching his tape, is very much a 3-tech only type of guy. He is not a nose tackle. If you put him at the nose tackle, you're going to have problems. Ed Oliver is the same way. You have kind of redundancy there on the interior, and Ed Oliver ain't going anywhere anytime soon. So, yeah, that'll help you on third downs a little bit. But I didn't think you needed to trade up for him, and I thought with this roster there may have been other needs, and especially run defending needs on the interior, which is where they're probably weakest at this moment in time. He ain't helping that.
The beauty in this game, they are all just future prognostications and markets have a way of moving. We'll see what they all look like at the next level. We'll also see plenty of names called on day 3, and that's where we head next. Coming up, rosters get built and opportunity knocks. Our guys offering a few of their favorites with depth selections set for Saturday. More HQ coming after a quick timeout. They say it's not when you go, it's where you go. Who we kidding? Both matter. Shadour's wait comes to a close on day 3 as the prime prospect is heading to Cleveland. Here he is shortly after being picked.
Thank you for the fans. Thank you for everybody. Thank you for Browns organization for giving me a chance. That's all I need. Our belief in God, that's all we care about. We know these decisions, things happen. Sometimes it's adversity. We got to change it though. We got to do different.
We got to do different. We can't control the uncontrollable.
You can't control that. So you just got to remain positive, stay happy at all times, and know God got you. I knew the whole time God had me, so I wasn't really panicking because I understood it's about perfect timing.
So there he is, and there you have it. Joe Musso pleased to be alongside Mike Renner and Ryan Wilson as we wrap up the NFL draft. We're going to focus on Shedeur. We're going to do a little day 3 and then give out some superlatives here in the draft in total. But we got to start with the story of this draft, and that is the slide doesn't even do it justice of Shedeur Sanders. All the way down to day 3, he ends up going to Cleveland, the team that we had linked him to there with the 2nd overall pick. It didn't go the way he wanted, but seems to be taking it in stride. What do you make of the experience in totality for Sanders?
It was wild. I mean, it was truly a one-of-one draft with how it was discussed all the way from pre-draft through middle of day 3. It ate up a lot of airwaves, and it's still eating up a lot of airwaves. But I do think that the man is talented. There is no denying that if things would have gone differently, if an interview here or there would have broken his way, he could have been a first-rounder. I mean, there were people with legit first-round grades on this guy with what he put on tape last year. So for the Cleveland Browns, though, I cannot fathom how weird this is going to all get. You have one of the, Dylan Gabriel, who you drafted in the 3rd round, Shedeur in the 5th round. I can't remember a team ever doing that. Right. Maybe you get a 1st and a 4th, but you never get a 3rd and a 5th. And then you already have 2 guys there. Shoot, 3 guys there. They're probably just going to tell Deshaun to go home. But Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco on the roster, I don't know how it's going to shake out, but I do not envy Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, it is wild, to borrow a phrase that Mike mentioned. And Mike and I were talking about this earlier, and I think Mike made up a good point. If Shedeur had approached the pre-draft process like Dylan Gabriel did, he's probably a top 5 pick, and there's no even conversation about it. Because, to Mike's point, I had him as number 25 in my big board, my QB2. So I thought maybe into 1st round, worst case, he goes to the top of the 2nd. The Browns ended up with pick 33 and 36, and then, of course, he ends up going in the 5th round. I cannot remember a situation like this where it wasn't a serious off-field incident. It was more just he wasn't popular in terms of the pre-draft process with how he approached it. And I would imagine this will be instructive for players to come after him. Yeah. And fair or not, this is where we are. But I think now he has his opportunity, and I get the sense that he's probably learned something from this lesson. Now you have to go out and play football. It doesn't matter what you learned or what you didn't learn. And I would imagine Dylan Gabriel, who we talked to at the Combine, he was incredibly motivated then. This will make him even more so.
Well, let's game this out for a second because we just saw the graphic with that quarterback room. You are looking at the ultimate twilight of a career in Flacco. You're looking at a new guy in the building, a Super Bowl champion, I will add, Kenny Pickett.
Love
a guy that isn't assumed to be in the building, and Deshaun Watson. Dylan Gabriel, who we could say was perhaps overdrafted, and then Shedeur Sanders, who was supposed to be 1-1 2 months ago, and now we're talking about him on day 3. You're managing personalities, you're managing opportunities, you're managing repetitions. Where does Shedeur's opportunity come when you're going to start hearing that clamoring if Flacco's not playing the football you want to see, Ryan?
I think he has to keep his head down and do his job. And, we live in an age, I'm an old-timer here, where everything is on social media, and we know that Shedeur has people following him around and documenting everything he does, and that's all well and good. But I think at the end of the day, in terms of what this means for him now, it has to be all about football. Again, to bring it back to Dylan Gabriel, when we talk to him, he drives a minivan. He's taking his teammates to practice, and that's the vibe you get from him. It's not the hashtag legendary or however you want to phrase it.
Is there a middle ground between minivan and Twitch stream? Can we?
Yeah, I think Kenny Pickett is the middle ground. So levitate just towards going to work, doing your job, going home, and focusing on what you can control.
That's the thing, is he's going to now a situation with Dylan Gabriel, who, by all accounts, has done everything right this pre-draft process that everyone loves, that was, called by a lot of execs the best interview they had in this pre-draft process. So if it's going south, if he's, still doing what he did in this pre-draft process going into the season, it's going to be very stark, the difference in that locker room for Kevin Stefanski.
Football is the great crucible of competition, and there will be competition in that quarterback room. We'll see how it all plays out for Shedeur and everybody else. Shedeur, one of 9 quarterbacks drafted here on day 3. Mike, give me your favorite selection of a quarterback here on day 3.
There weren't, outside of Shedeur, obviously, was my favorite, but outside of him, Riley Leonard going to the Indianapolis Colts, I thought it was a great situation for him. Someone tweeted out, and I wholeheartedly agree with this, he's like a combination of Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. I mean, like, the guy fits right in that quarterback room. He's a heck of an athlete. He's going to be able to add to that running game if he ever gets a shot to do so, and I think it's just a great spot for him to develop there with Shane Steichen.
I love a draft pick that makes both quarterbacks angry because you see a little bit of yourself in that person in Riley Leonard. Great kid, by the way, and I think the athleticism, as Mike talked about, that fits there because he wasn't going to fit every scheme. I went with Will Howard. Joe Musso's quarterback of the future in Pittsburgh. As I said, the 185 where he was drafted is the new 199. Look, here's the reality. Like, I'm a huge Kyle McCord guy. Kyle McCord outplayed him his last year at Ohio State when Will Howard was still at Kansas State. But all Will Howard did down the stretch the last 6 games, 5 of those games, he balled out. 6'4", 236. He can run. He has a big arm. He is going to be a system quarterback, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing. And the good news is, as a 6th-round pick, he's not going to be expected to play right away. And they're trying to make the offensive line better. They're trying to make the run game better. The defense, they're trying to improve. So even if he does have to play, it won't be put on his shoulders. And honestly, I feel better about this than I did about the 2022 selection of Kenny Pickett in round 1.
Execution happens where skill meets opportunity, and we'll see what that execution level is at for all of these players that we saw selected in round 3. It'll come at some point, some sooner than others. Let's talk about a player that might have an impact, Ryan, on the offensive side of the ball that you saw selected here, a selection you love on day 3.
Yeah, I went with Stanford's Alec Ayuminor. Mike and I talked to him at the Combine from Canada, and he's the latest in a long line of Canadians coming down, balling out. And I got a first-hand glance at him in the fall against Syracuse, where he came in and single-handedly won that game for them. He is not a burner. He ran sub 4.5. He doesn't play that fast. Plays outside. Will be a possession receiver, contested catch guy. Here he is lighting up Syracuse in the back of the end zone, making that contested catch, high-point catch. And I think he gives Cam Ward yet another weapon. They drafted some speed and Kamiri DK. I love the idea. Ayuminor adding to that wide receiver room, and I think he could have gone into the 3rd round, and that would have felt about right to me.
I love Jalen Royals, the Utah State wide receiver, going to the Kansas State Chiefs, because obviously anytime you're going to Patrick Mahomes, it's going to be a good situation for you to produce in, and I thought this guy's tape was great. I mean, he's in a weird offense there. He's split wide. Sometimes it looks like he's standing on the sidelines. That's truly how wide their splits were at times, the Utah State offense, but he's got a great first step. He's great after the catch. He has exceptional ball skills, and he goes to a wide receiver room where, Hollywood Brown has had injury issues recently. Rashee Rice has had injury issues recently. If those guys aren't fully healthy, I think he has a great shot to produce. In only 7 games, he had 839 yards this past season. If he would have played full season, this guy could have been a top 2-round pick.
Schematically, it always feels like, and this is not reductive to the defensive side of the ball, but maybe change and opportunity can be exacted quicker on that side of the ball than having to digest these playbooks and these schemes that these offensive players are going to have to learn defensively. Who's a day 1 difference maker to you?
To me, David Walker, the
you love that
Central
guy.
Arkansas edge rusher's day 1 difference maker, just because he knows how to bull rush. And at 6 foot, 263, that's a guy who can translate with the bull rush. He ran a 4.63 too at the combine. The guy's explosive. Yep. And he goes to a spot in Tampa Bay where they're not going to ask him to do much else. That's what they have Yaya Diaby doing, who's kind of a guy in a similar mold of just big, strong, explosive. And he's already 25, so he's a grown man. This guy's already able to hit the NFL football field and fit right in.
I'm going to give you David Walker in last year's draft class. Javon Solomon got drafted to the Buffalo Bills. And I mentioned that because I like someone who they took who looks exactly the opposite of Javon Solomon, David Walker, and 6'7", 330-pound Deion Walker. Now, the issue was a back injury in 2024. Didn't play quite up to what we saw in 2023. But if they can unlock what he can do physically, next to Ed Oliver, it feels like it's unfair to the rest of the AFC East. I absolutely love this pick. I know Mike is a big Deion Walker fan. And again, you unlock his talents, and this feels like you're getting a first-rounder in the 4th round.
All right, we have touched upon just about everything over the last 3 days. We've talked about all of these prospects, each of these teams, the division specifically. There's only one thing left to do, and that's to hand out your superlatives, your winners and your losers. Ryan, I'm coming right back to you because how does that Bills player situate into your big winner from this draft?
This draft class, A+ for me. We talked about it earlier tonight, and this feels different. And by that I mean, is this the moment that the Bills are going to get over the hump in the AFC? You made the point, and you do it frequently. Don't sleep on the Chiefs. If they stumble for a week or two, that means absolutely nothing until the last whistle has blown.
Let them throw you off the scent now.
Exactly. Maxwell Harrison, baller. TJ Sanders, I like him a little bit better than Mike, but I love his tape. Landon Jackson and Jackson Hawes, best blocking tight end in this class, and I think Chase Lund has an opportunity to be a really good depth piece in the 6th round. I had him going a little higher than that as an offensive tackle at UConn. They focused on defense. Josh Allen, you do your thing. We'll take care of the defensive side of the ball, us and Sean McDermott. And next stop, fingers crossed, you can make it to the Super Bowl.
Joe, you're going to love mine. It's Caleb Williams. He was far and away the biggest winner. The bevy of weapons he has to throw to, it's the best in the NFL.
What is that?
I'm taking it somewhere between Kenosha and Lake Forest. They reached across party lines and shook hands here.
It's absurd now what they have there. They already had a great, receiving core. Like DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Cole Kmet was already, like, you're happy with that. Now you're over the moon. I love Colson Loveland's tape. To me, he is, he's not Brock Bowers, but he's probably the closest thing we've seen outside of Brock Bowers over the past decade. Luther Burden would have been, people are talking about him after he had over 1,200 yards last year, coming in this year. Top 10 pick, falls all the way to the 2nd round, and kind of exactly what they need as a slot wide receiver. Man, I don't know if Caleb Williams takes the next step. The who's stopping this offense, those quote graphics you see all the time on, Instagram and X. I don't know who's stopping this offense.
Packers fan.
I don't know.
All in on the Bears.
And I will say this. I will lob that same accolade to you. I loved what the Packers did. I loved what Green Bay did this weekend to showcase the sport that we love so much. It was quite a showing there in Green Bay. And anytime you take a wide receiver, you win a little of my heart as well. Let's talk losers. I know it's hard to stamp something as concrete as that when we don't know what these players are going to be on field. This is all just long-term futures. But who's a team that you think maybe missed the mark, Mike?
Well, I'm going to go with 4 teams that are losers, and it's the secondary of the AFC South. All the talent that got added to that division, Tyler Warren to the Indianapolis Colts, Travis Hunter to the Jacksonville Jaguars, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel to the Houston Texans, and then Cam Ward going to the Tennessee Titans. All, one of the worst divisions in football last season. It's going to turn around in a big way, and if you're an AFC South DB,
I like it.
You're in trouble.
It does feel like that division is finally going to turn the corner. One of the biggest winners on day 2, Mike Renner, because this guy Dylan Gabriel got drafted. One of the biggest losers on day 3, Dylan Gabriel, because Shedeur Sanders got drafted. I was so happy for Mike for about 4 hours because he went in the 3rd round. No one saw that but Mike. Again, and I told Mike this when we talked.
There's no real starter in Cleveland. Dylan's going to get a shot.
That's what I thought.
He felt a lot better about it on Friday night than he did on Saturday afternoon. Fair or not. But when we talked to Dylan at the Combine, and Mike was already a huge fan, I was all in on him because of the confidence with which he had, the minivan connection. Obviously, as an older person who has kids, that also got me to where I wanted to go. But I think, look, we talk about fair, unfair for Shedeur Sanders. It's unfair for Dylan Gabriel, if we're being honest, because you get drafted in the 3rd round, and you don't expect, as Mike noted earlier, to have another quarterback drafted to compete for that job. But here we are. So I'm sure, just like all the other stops that Dylan's made in his college career, he'll face it head on and do the best he can and go from there.
Ryan Wilson, Mike Renner, a tip of the cap and a thanks, as always, all that you've done for our draft coverage here this weekend and far prior. But the work isn't done. It's with the first pick. Download, subscribe, and enjoy everything you need. Just because the draft is come and gone, it doesn't mean that he stops. Ryan Wilson, what's the rest of your weekend look like?
Oh, you won't believe this. We have a 2026 first-round mock draft coming out.
Let's go.
Days from now. Arch Manning, come on down. You're the next quarterback of? I don't know. Who's going to be picking?
Cleveland Browns.
I wish I would have given it some thought.
Let's go with the Los Angeles Rams to make things spicy.
The Jets are going to be bad again.
There we go.
Jets.